Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. You have just watched a short video of our activities highlight in last year. The video reflects what SwissNext China can do, and I hope you enjoy the exciting video. Now, welcome to our webinar, The Shenzhen Way of Open Innovation, New Partnership Model Within the Hardware Ecosystem. My name is Simi Yang, and I'm Project Coordinator of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at SwissNext China. SwissNext China is a science consulate of Switzerland in China, and we are active in China for more than 11 years to connect the dots between Switzerland and China in education, research, and innovation. In today's webinar, we will have a presentation from our speaker, and afterwards, there will be an online Q&A session for our audience with the speaker and moderator. Your questions are highly welcomed and encouraged, so please type your question in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window. Our moderator and the speaker will try to answer your question as many as possible. The webinar will last for 1 hour and end up at 11 a.m. in Switzerland and 5 p.m. in China. Now let's come back to our topic, Shenzhen. Shenzhen is one of the most innovative hardware hubs in the world. And with the unique hardware ecosystem rapidly evolving, the partnership model has also gradually changed. So how should entrepreneurs will prepare for a win-win partnership? And what is the Shenzhen way of open innovation? With these questions, we are honored to have our distinguished guests with us today to share their point of views. We hope this kind of knowledge and experience exchange will help startups to be inspired by a new cooperation mindset, and also to learn best practice from Shenzhen hardware and hardware ecosystem. Now let's welcome our guests, our speaker Eric from Seed Studio, and our moderator Raphael from Octanis Instrument. Eric, Raphael, let's say hi to everyone. Hello.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you.
Okay, now let me hand over the time to our moderator, Raphael. Raphael, welcome.
Welcome also from my side to this webinar. It's a great pleasure to give you a glimpse today in the Shenzhen hardware ecosystem. My name is Raphael and I'm an electronics engineer based in Lausanne, Switzerland. 6 years ago, I made my first experience building hardware. While we were still students a group of friends and I decided that it was time to put our theory knowledge from university into practice. And we set an ambitious goal, which was to build an open source scientific rover platform for Antarctica. We built everything from scratch. We 3D printed the parts that make the mechanics. We glued together a case. And thanks to Shenzhen-based hardware manufacturers, we were able to make our own PCBs. So PCBs are the green electronic boards that you find in computers, cell phones, etc. Because those manufacturers actually offered small quantity orders at affordable prices for our student budget. The small group of friends gradually grew into a diverse community of makers, and we founded the nonprofit association Octanis. From our own experience, we know that everyone can innovate in hardware, no matter their background or level of seniority, as long as you are in the right environment and you have an encouraging community around you. What do I mean by right environment? Well, here in the background in our makerspace, during a workshop, you see a stock of parts and tools, and this is really everything you need for a hardware endeavor. It's having materials around you, because every function you want to put in your product, into your idea, needs a physical component. And having these components around you is really crucial, because you don't want to wait for it. You don't want to slow down your progress, because it just kills your creativity and your flow. So the more stuff you have around you, the better, and the faster you can move. Today, I am still spending most of my time as a hardware developer within Octanis Instruments. Octanis Instruments is a spin-off of the Makerspace, and basically its sister company. So we help startups navigate their first time building a hardware product. And because often when you go beyond your hardware, Arduino prototype, let's say, and you want to scale up production, it's really important that you have a partner with you who has experience, and you need to be in close contact with factories and directly talk to manufacturers. This is something we do exactly with the China Hardware Innovation Camp. This is a student program, a university program, where I am coaching engineering, business, and design students to develop IoT products. Usually in summer, not this time, unfortunately, we take them to Shenzhen and Hong Kong to immerse them into the biggest hardware ecosystem in the world. They get to visit factories, pitch at local accelerators, and most importantly, finalize their hardware prototype using local resources. And it's always really cool to see how direct contact with the manufacturers can be a boost for their projects. Basically, Shenzhen is like a gigantic makerspace. Any imaginable subcomponent of your product will be available somewhere, like here in the iconic Huaqiangbei electronics market. And just like our small makerspace in Lausanne, Shenzhen has been the breeding ground for countless innovative companies. Most famously, probably, you know, Huawei. Now, one of the most well-known hardware enablers in Shenzhen is Seed Studio, which is also where I ordered my first PCB back in the time, and is one of the main partners of the SHIC program. So we bring our students there and get local support from their engineers. And I'm very, very happy that today's talk is given by Seed's founder, Eric Pan. So before we start, remember that you can use the Q&A function at any time during the talk, and we will try to answer as many questions in the end. So without further ado, Eric, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Raphael. Thank you, Simin, to have me here. Hello, everyone. This is Eric from City Studio, and also co-founded the China Makerspace. As so many things has been changed that we don't have the trick for the summer, but I still appreciate this opportunity very much that we can use online webinar to share our latest thoughts and understandings. As City has been, I just found that City has been existing for 11 years, exactly like Swiss Next. We have been seeing so many passions from startups and so many failures from them as well. So I like to use this opportunity to share what I has City been trying to do and how the startups has been failed for the past, and what would be the possible better ways to do innovation in the future. So about Seed, we provide the latest open source hardware around IoT, AR, and automations. And we also help developers bring their latest application from one to many pieces to do the supply chain management. I will make it somehow quicker. And if you have questions, you can ask later, and I will send the recording and the slides to you later. So we are based in Shenzhen. About 11 years, we came to Shenzhen because it's like the big maker space that we can consolidate all the resources. But we face the global market. We serve the developers from all over the world, and we work with our distributors to enable like easy to approach inventories. Seed has been doing many things. Our vision is provide open tech for the rest of us. We first work with the tech providers to get their silicon softwares and turn them into open source hardware. And with the fundamental ecosystem of Shenzhen, we provide agile manufacturer services. So the small batch manufacturers can be very easily and fast integrated. Now we are providing more configurable solutions that people can just use them for their purposes. We want to enable more professional makers so they can deploy according to their target vertical or their regional needs. So to do that, IoT is not a very simple, straightforward thing. It has to bring more atoms into bits. You need to have sensors, you need to have communication modules, you need to have gateway, software, hardware, etc. We're probably working with the first tier companies provide the latest technology. Among them, you will see uBlocks, which is a Swiss company, and we also work with Sensorion for the best sensors. So by providing this more open, modular, structurized solutions, any engineer or even non-engineers can repurpose the hardware according to their needs easily. And also we provide services to go from open source hardware where it's just like zero. You have to go to prototypes to do the engineering samples to small to large quantity manufacture. And we use very open and flexible services to enable that. And I think that's where Raphael got his first board made from us. And we enable a lot of makers to turn their ideas into real product and ship them to the global needs. And we also work with big companies like Microsoft, Schneider's, Nivea, etc. So back to 2012, people start to say from Silicon Valley that hardware could be the new software. That's where a lot of companies start to rush into hardware and trying to build new applications or startups around new hardware. That's where we hosted a lot of visitors from all over the world to Shenzhen. And a big excitement was the Paper Watch. It's the first e-paper smartwatch that has raised over $10 million of Kickstarter funds. And it has proven outside of big companies that the micro trends can gather enough needs from the global market. So a lot of people following Paper Watch to build their own hardware. And we have to, there are too many of them that we have to make a map for the makers. They come to Shenzhen, they try to Google manufacturing in Shenzhen, you will see all the red dots. They're about manufacturer, they're about technology, but you need to find a way to navigate. So we create the map, and the perfect interface is Huaqiangbei. That's a lot of passions, a lot of explorations happened back to that time. And if we abstract a little bit, what Shenzhen is offering. If it's offering all the way from the cell, if we compare hardware into the different layers, it offers the software, hardware, electronics, mechanic parts, all the way down to packaging, shipping. Within the 1 hour's drive, you can gather all the elements you need to accomplish your hardware. So that's the real power and attraction that brings people to Shenzhen. Yes, of course you can do that. But it's much easier to build a prototype now, versus really to getting them manufactured. Because a lot of people don't understand the difference between you by design and assemble a prototype yourself versus you trust and entitle all the manufacturing to someone you don't know. And you have to program their process of manufacturing in a remote way. It's becoming a lot of more difficult than people thought. And also, people come to Shenzhen unprepared because software is like a band. You have 2 people, 3 people, you can make a website, upload to AWS or Azure, and now it's working. But for hardware, you need different kinds of people. You need engineers, you need electronics, mechanics, you need people to do the quality checking, you need engineers to really bring it for manufacturabilities. You need to manage orchestra. You need to have very clear project management and push all the obstacles to make these things happen. And because we are big advocator of open source hardware, we have been pushing open source hardware from 2008. Excuse me. Now, a lot of open source hardware are focusing on earlier stage, which means from design to prototype to all the way not to exceed engineering samples. But very few, almost none, open source designs has shared the know-how of real manufacturing. How do we bring the manufacturing into 100 pieces or more than that? You need to have a test plan. You need to fix the parallelizing. You need to prepare test jig. You need to have the total quality standards set for your suppliers, for yourself, and for your customers. You need to align the expectations. And you need to build the SOP from your lab, from yourself. You should train a fleet of different people that can follow the same operations. And you need to work on the certificates. How do you pass CE, FCC? Not to mention, if you want to do medical devices, you need to wrestling with FDA. And if you go more than 10,000 pieces, how do you do the auto testing to increase the yield, to make the manufacturing faster? How do you prepare for all the accumulated experience for manufacturers to DFMEA? How do you do the Six Sigma to increase your yield? There's too many missing know-hows, and they are buried inside the manufacturers. And even there, I see very few books, very few open knowledge talking about them. And that has caused a lot of failures. Also, most fundamentally, these manufacturers, even they can help you with everything, they are not prepared for agile startups, which are high mix of different culture. So this is an open example. If you go check out this website, it's on Kickstarter. CST1 was the world's thinnest watch made like a few years ago by a very famous IDEO industrial designer. This guy is very well connected, and he has a very convincing product, and it's ready. And he went out for big contract manufacturers, but as a Kickstarter campaign, he has to share all the information, all the progresses, but the contract manufacturer does not want to leak any of the information or know-how of manufacturability. So there are a lot of conflict happened. In the end, the manufacturer refused to manufacture, and they ask for a lot of extra cost that exceed the funds this guy has raised. So we see a lot of culture gap and impact from this. We might be a very ambitious potential company, but we come to the manufacturer floor, you are just talking about numbers. How many pieces are you going to manufacture? Do you understand how to prepare for the manufacturability? And should they trust you, and by what kind of means? We see a lot of failures through this process. And I'm trying to wrap them up a little bit to share with you. 99%, first about this picture. This is a banner I saw when I was driving on Highway 101 in California back in 2013. It's about, that's the peak time that people are so passionate about invent. Hacker Dojo, Make Magazine, Tech Museum, Noise Bridge, Tech Shop. But out of the 5 logos, 3 has been closed or ceased in operations because 99% of the hardware startups has failed. In my experience as we walk through with them through these journeys of both passion and failure. I think these three major reasons of failing is first, the hardware itself has no value. If you want to make some hardware expect it's going to be selling, you have to understand your focus should not be on making this hardware itself, is to using the hardware to answer some people's demand. And also, even it's a proven solid demand, the market needs more time. The consumers or the customers need some time to understand, to wait for someone to try it until the majority of the market is going to follow and buy that. It's a very slow process, especially you go to some deep vertical industries. You might need a few years to wait for that to happen. But whenever people are passionate, too passionate, they are driven by investment, they want too much to have something that could be selling exponentially like DJI Jones. A lot has been failed because of pace. Even you can have meet the right product, you have the right timing, team is very difficult. How do you hire a team of all the diversities and to manage them and to build the trust that you can have the win in the long run? This usually kills a lot of companies. So is there any better path? I use this background a lot. This is back in 2012 when I was traveling the first time in Nuremberg in Germany. And I went into the church of their main church. I saw something on the pillow. It's a surveillance camera system. And I looked closely up. It's using Raspberry Pi, plus some commercial off-shelf cameras. I believe it's working. And it's not in a fancy Kickstarter campaign or on some shops that it's not a consumer electronics at all. But people are using tech to resolve some local issues. I think we can forget about making some consumer electronics these days. The majority of the hardware startups, we could more leverage existing hardware and technology, but look at a different value you create. So I'm trying to categorize this hardware startup or IoT startups into two parts. First is upstream tech. You either have a silicon, it's easier to make silicon with Raspberry Pi with ARM. You can have a very differentiating algorithms for machine learning or for some special patterns. And maybe you do some very special sensors like sensorium, you do the core components, and maybe you have some advanced materials. By doing that, you are the upstream tech company. So by working with Shenzhen or working with or like wider ecosystem, you are actually selling your tech into more tech companies. You provide them some key ingredients for them to go to the next grade. The second part is, the second category is the applications. So for a lot of applications, they don't have very core technology, but they are the integrator, they are coordinator of complexities. First, we look at the services with hardware. For example, we have a lot of shared bike in China. The key is not about bike or not about the IoT connected node of a bike. It's about a transportation service for individuals. So people can rent the bike. So this creator first have a service in mind and they find the right hardware. Most of the time it's contracted to some engineering companies. So they can repurpose that device. It was used to be a tracker for their bikes. Now they complete the service. Or it could be something with a service. So I think most people has been using smart speakers from Amazon Echo or from all the big companies. It's a speaker, but it's not just a speaker. It's a speaker with a service in the back. So the big companies will sell the thing at a discount, but it's a service, it's a subscriptions, it's all the collateral commercial values out of that thing. So if we really want to make a hardware, it has to think of the business models, how do you compete with the value adding part. If you don't belong to the two subcategories, it's still worth it to make some platforms about hardware. We see so many good dev platforms like Tindy. You can make your own hardware and sell them. You can use Kickstarter to crowdfunding. So there are a lot of like dev tools around the hardware. So I think we need, if we do hardware, we need to be very clear about the real value we deliver. And I would strongly suggest that you don't design for manufacture, because design for manufacture are usually for big companies. If you're Apple, if you are like Sony Ericsson, you come to Shenzhen and you're big enough. You can ask the manufacturers to work with you, follow your demand. And what you need to do is to change your designs to fit into the process of materials. But for the majority of startups, you don't have that kind of bargaining power. So what you need to do is go to the market. I think Rafael has showed this picture as well. That's Huaqiang Bay. And that represents a lot of engineering sources. There are so many inventions there already. You just look at what they're already building, trying to hack that, trying to repurpose the creations, to change the functions, change the software electronics. You don't rebuild from scratch, but you try to reuse what's already out there. And you design your business model, you design your service around what's existing manufactured. And I want to share some data, like there are over 1.7 million small to medium-sized companies in Shenzhen. There are all kinds of them. But a good portion of them are design houses. From many years ago, they started to build like the pagers, they build mobile phones, you need all the smart hardwares. They're all very good engineering companies. What we need to do is to work with them, find them, and they can impress you. They know the manufacturer much better than you, but they don't know your market they're looking at. They don't build the brand influences than you. So I think there's deserve to look at something in a new way, that we should be working with the ecosystem more closely. So to do that, our preferred way is to root in the community, because in the community of Chaihuo Makerspace, we both have the local engineers, freelancers, local companies, design houses, along with all the startups, innovators from all over the world. So it's like a hub of different people share the purposes, working together, knowing each other, and we becoming the platform to accelerate these programs. Like for each year, SHIK with Swiss Next bring students from Switzerland to Chaihuo. But I hope that in the future, we can curate that better, that people don't need to reinvent the hardware, but to repurpose the hardware. And the result is not that shabby. Look, I want to give you an example. This is called Explorer. It's a professional spectrum analyzer, but it's a handheld cheap version. This is made by a startup, actually a maker team in Madrid. It's a one-man's army. About 6 years ago, he was just looking at our website and trying to repurpose from the existing aluminum extrusions and ask us to use CNC to route some enclosures. And all the components he chose afterwards, they are just from the existing ones. But we redesigned the PCB, we redo the package. Now it's one of the best sellers in the Maker network. If you want to debug your Wi-Fi, if you want to debug your wireless video or audio, this is a perfect tool. It's a vertical market. It's not a consumer electronics. And this guy does not design for manufacture or do a very huge volume. He started with a few hundreds and keep rolling to several thousands per month. And it's a very good sustainable business. And I think that's a lot of core technology from Switzerland can be amplified with Shenzhen this way. And also we are providing more advanced solutions. Like this is maybe a lot of people have been using the Linux computer. It's called BiggerBoard. And it's one of the first open source SPC platform. A lot of people come back to us when they do the prototype, they want to customize. So we turn that into security gateways where people use their smart meterings, even use it for boat navigation systems. So they don't build from this device from scratch, but we work with this company. we work with these startups to customize those. That's a part of open source. And now the open source hardware has been getting more advanced. So as we are listening to more of the needs, people have more inspirations about environmental sensing, about pollution controls. But to do that, you need to have accessible tech, IoT sensors, gateways in the wild. So how do we do prepare our hardware facing the harsh environment? How to make it more waterproof? So the open source tech is as well evolving according to the needs. And to do the IoT, you need to integrate the software to hardware. And a lot of more companies, including ourselves, are trying to do that more ready, that you can just scan 2D barcode and to reuse them in a API with your software. So things are getting much easier, but if it's not needed, don't try to rebuild things from scratch. That's too time and money consuming. And the more solutions from us, from other companies, they are very close to ready to use solutions, and it's configurable, which means you can just change, trim it. It's like DIY a computer. You choose the right parts to your IoT needs. To the fundamental, it's nothing too new. It's just a computer or some sensors or MCU wrapped in a new form factor, but it's a complexity of engineering you should not be repeating. So, but if there are some certain circumstances you really want to rebuild something, maybe it's you have too big volume, you need to worry about the cost. Maybe there'll be some form factor or power consumption needs and need to re-engineer in that. Bear in mind that you should do the DFM. You should look at what's the common mistakes. A key form factor, a key element for this is whenever you design something, you know all the details. So you can record to your memories what to do next. But whenever you are passing the manufacturing files to manufacturers, you should give it as complete documentations as possible. And in your design, you better to be mistaken proof. You better to cater to the tolerances of the manufacturer, because a lot of manufacturer has been popular out there. They don't have an open interface that you follow. So we are trying to make the manufacturer more open source, but before that, you should look at all the DFM. For example, the PCBs, I don't want to read all this. I will send the slides later, but all the design files, if you want to customize, you should worry about how people are going to manufacture it. So give them little room to mistake that. And also the same way happens to mechanic parts, which are usually the majority of the problem happens. Because PCB they are usually standardized, but for mechanic parts, because the manufacturing process is not so well digitally controlled. And during the usage, you have the vibrations, you have the forces to distort the mechanic parts. The difficult ones, like the crucify we make for a Swedish startup, it's a palm-sized quadcopter. I should have here, but the rotors, the propellers, they are from some existing parts that we need to very carefully to engineer in that for better performances. These are like very simple looking things, but that might be getting the whole projects in an unexpectedness. And very shortly, the manufacturing process can be in this kind of segments. You can curate tokens, quotations. Before the projects kick off, you need to very carefully bring that for the first batch of manufacturing, usually taking 1 month. The mass protection is very fast in Shenzhen, but you still need to prepare for 20 to 30 days. The main time consuming part on how to get the components in the same place, same time. And after that, you need to worry about the delivery time to your places and all the after sales services. And this is just for one parts. If you want to make a robot, you want to make something complex, you might repeat the process on all the components you make. And I think a lot of people worry about the quality. When we manufacture in China, it would be the quality be terrible. I think, especially Shenzhen, it's a big ecosystem. You have the supply chain for Apple, for iPhone, and also you have the supply chain for cheap random toys. So the really matters is how do you find the right supplier? How do you apply the right quality control all the way from the beginning, from supply checking, from design to inspections to do the final quality check. And if you are doing some longevity product, you need to worry about the reliabilities. You need some professional way to do the reliability tests of certificates and guarantee the consistency between different manufacturing lots. So it's a headache for a lot of small startup teams. But if you want, these are the basic principles you need to start with. And very commonly, even for our own in-house product, whenever people design something, they might ignore some details. They might be changing during the manufacturing process. It's called ECN, engineering change notes. So the manufacturer knows they need to pivot on the fly. And it's a very expensive and it's a very dangerous action if it has to happen. So these are the basic know-hows of how to avoid the risk of manufacturing. And if we have to invent, I would propose that a lot of successful projects we look at is don't manufacture something to resolve the problem of the whole world. But we can use open tech to look at SDG. Because in the SDG scenarios, you will see a lot of problems that a commercial way didn't resolve them well, either because it's a too vertical a need, or it has been tackling with old tech. So if we look at them in a different mindset, you will see a lot of blue seas. They might be like under taken care of problems or its emerging needs. So I would suggest to look at that. One of our very exciting and proud project is Code Jumper. This is a project from Microsoft Research Lab. They are thinking of how do we help blind people to do coding. And they invented the physical toolset to do that. And we have the APH, the biggest blind press from United States, is pushing that. So it's, if we're sitting in our laboratory or sitting in our classroom, we won't think of that kind of innovations. But if we jump out of that, we look at SDG, there are a lot of needs that we can accomplish this way. It's about education. It's for vertical people. But people from all over the world has similar needs for the blind people. And this is Smart Citizen. It's one of the EU funded project of Horizon 2020. And it's an open environment sensing project. You can get the pollutions from the cities and you can deploy your own sensing kit. And it's about sustainable or in the city and urbans. It's about climate. It's about how do you build a more organic partnership with the local systems. A very interesting case is this was deployed in Barcelona in the beginning because it's from the Fab Lab, Barcelona. Then the government was worried that there are so many taxis asking for taxi stands, and they are not sure if that is real. So they deploy these sensors in different stands, and they can have the real data. And they've proven that it's already 50% of that is empty. So by doing that, we build more data, and that data evolves into insights, and people can use that to make rightful decisions. And it's an open tool, so you can think of all the imagination usages. And also it's about the Farmbeat. It was from Microsoft again, but it got embraced by Unilever, DuPont, Orland, and Bayer. They want to have more smarter way of doing the agriculture, like to using all the fertilizers or the herbicides. So they use drones, use AI, vision learnings, and they use some points to do things in the data. So it's not a popular everyday project, but we see all these needs. For example, the agriculture is the least digitalized scenarios. But if we can use more open tech to look at these verticals, we might find more interesting, more sustainable commercial grades for a startup. We want to have more small, like sustainable startups, Some of them might evolve into unicorns, and the SDG provides a lot of these grants for people to look at. And also Africa or a lot of developing countries. For these people, they don't have enough access to the latest IoT or AI, but it does not mean they don't have the demand, they don't have the potentiality. So if we can give more open source tools, open source technology to them, they can be very helpful for them to regain their confidence, and they look at their local problems to fix them by themselves. So a lot of things I want to share, but I would like to reserve more time for conversations. In a way, we have been working with a lot of Swiss companies to go from ideas to through the passion and pains and failures. But I think the journey never stops. And we want to, at the very beginning, we have been proposing that it's not only made in China, it's innovative with China. Thanks for SwissNet to giving us the opportunity. I'd like to chat more. You can reach us through the email or any other means. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for this super interesting presentation and giving us insights into projects that are currently ongoing and how Seed functions and could be useful. We have 20 minutes, almost 20 minutes to ask a couple of questions. A few of you have done so already, so I'll try to go through them as many of them as possible. Maybe just the first thing, which is just out of the current context, is this whole COVID situation impacting your business in terms of supply chain issues, maybe, but also in terms of customer demands?
Yeah, we are fighting very hard towards that. Like from February to March, because in China it was still in heavy crisis that most of factories have been shut down, ourselves has been shut down. So we had to fight on the supply chain side. But for now, it's almost 100% back to normal. Then we need to deal with the customer demand side, because a lot of distributors, a lot of universities that have been shut down. But I think the demand is still strong. The people, when they were staying home, they're thinking of innovators gonna innovate. So the coronavirus does not stop them from doing that. Maybe they cannot go to the in-field site, but they can still do that like hacking from home or making from home. So I think it's a lot of uncertainty, but I think it's still manageable.
Yeah, hacking from home, that's also what we are doing here.
Yeah, I can,
so I hope
that.
everyone is safe and healthy at Seed Studio and everywhere as well. One question of the audience was, when you do a proof of concept product or prototype, what would you recommend to start with? Somewhat a custom design, like doing it the maker way and then working with partners like Seed Studio, or use existing components of SMEs or big companies and put that together to get something working, or somehow a mix maybe?
I think there are two ways. Like the traditional way is you build there are three ways. The most ancient way is that you are a professional engineering company. You start to build from components, everything from scratch. That's very challenging. But as of for the last 10 years, the makers are starting building from modules. It's very much like programming. You go from assembly to like C or C++. But as now we are doing more frameworks, it's like we're showing the solutions. It's close to 0.99. If you want environment sensing, you want more AI hardware, smart cameras, I think it's in the future, it's going to be more, you start from ready to use solutions and to tweak it or to change it for your purposes. Yeah, I think it's going to be from building your modules, remixing the modules, to go from the ready-to-use solutions and to configure it.
Right, and I think, as you always tell our students, it's about hacking the supply chain. So using as much as you can already that's out there, and then just doing whatever is custom to your project or to your product. So a question that comes up very, very often, and also now in the audience, is about IP and how to protect your IP. And I'm sure you're confronted with that every time as well. what is your take on that? How do you protect your IP as a foreign company? Do people even try to protect it, etc.?
So I think the ultimate way of IP protection is speed. So if you can innovate faster than anyone else or reach out to your market faster than anyone else, IP is less important. You see that in Shenzhen, or especially in a lot of IoT domains, the innovation happens every half a month, half a year. If you have something and you apply for the patent all over the world, and it takes like 1 year or 2 years, but this lifetime of the product might last just for half a year. So speed is the ultimate solution. But if you don't have the speed, if you are looking at some verticals, it's a business B2B solution. You might look at, you may counteract that with customer relationships, because you win the trust of your customers. The IP is a lesser issue. But if you don't have these two advantages, you might want to protect your IP by disassembling your hardwares into different parts. And if you're working with the supply chains, you just get part of them. A lot of people talk about the third way, but I think the most important way is about your business actions. How do you reach out to your customers? Even you see, like Apple Watch, they made a smartwatch, but now every big companies have a way to innovate over that. So it's the business proven that is most important. But this only applies for application layer. If you are doing silicons, if you are doing materials, chemicals, that of course you need to protect your IP, especially as a business secret. So it's a case by case.
And as you said, hardware, selling the hardware is not really making you the money. It's the brand and the service behind it. So even if you do innovate with the supply chain in Shenzhen, that's not the entire trade secret that you have in your
Exactly.
business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Some other topic was about, so someone asked about cryptocurrency markets. Do you see that impacting your business in some way, or somehow impacting the hardware manufacturing business?
There are some good impacts actually. Like from 5 to 6 years ago, people asked to pay us in Bitcoin because, but we were too conservative to receive that. And now, because of a lot of mining machines has been going down, and we got to use the mining machine chipset for machine learning. If you look at K210, it's from Canaan, and it's one of the minor company making like Bitcoin mining chipsets. Now it's a perfect platform that can be used for AI. So it's providing more tech through these crazy mining sessions. But beyond that, in the future, maybe some Bitcoin, not Bitcoin, blockchain related solutions that can benefit IoT or build an extra layer of trust over the services.
Now from Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies moving to health tech. So Sebastian Kala is asking, there are many foreign health tech startups doing open innovation collaborations with Chinese companies. Do you see that happening? And what do you see? Yeah. What do you think are the most important success factors there?
So a very simple way to answer that is usually the foreign companies can sell a product expensively, while a Chinese company can produce them cheap and efficiently. So it's a very perfect to have a trust diversity hybrid team. So I think that's the most important.
Yeah. So going back to moving into Shenzhen as a newcomer, maybe how do you actually find your way around? Like, how do you navigate through this maze of what you said, 1.7 million hardware companies? How do you find the good ones? Do you need to try to bargain with them, negotiate with them, etc.? What would be your tips there?
So my tip, it's not a tip, but our experience is keep trying. Because it's like day one, about 11 years ago, first time I came to Shenzhen, I spent 3 months going to Huaqiang Bay every day. get to know every counters, to understand their business model, their bosses, what's behind them, is a factory or it's just a trader. So only through a lot of field work, you can understand the real players in the market and start to talk with them. But also you need to sell yourself, because to them, you are just a small startup from nowhere. How do they trust you? How do they allocate the best engineer to help your project? You have to do a lot of uh, efforts. Like I go to the suppliers, I go to the market every day in the beginning. People see me dragging a lot of goods. They say, okay, this is a potential buyer. They get to know you and they trust you. They see you are paying, they see your credentials, and that builds the relationships. And of course, as long as it goes on, we move out of Huaqiang Bay, we go to bigger suppliers, and we meet bad suppliers, we meet good suppliers, we meet suppliers that went bankrupt, we meet all kinds of suppliers. You keep the right ones and let go of the bad ones. So it's a very long time to build the process.
I would say, however, from my experience as well, that compared to well, other companies, it is definitely easier to get very close to, well, the sales channel or you know, other partners in the company. And even as a small entity back in the time as a student association, we were able to have direct contact with suppliers. And I think that is really amazing, and you know, opens a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
However, now maybe during this pandemic, it's not, well, it's simply not possible for us Westerners to come to Shenzhen in person unless we have some business relationship there officially. How would you recommend now interacting with the ecosystem?
I think it's the same question for the ecosystem as well. It's because pandemic, the previous way of doing business is gone. You cannot host the visitors to your factories. So how do you do online content? How do you do webinars? How do you do video blogs? That's where I'm trying to make manufacturers more open source by showing people the details. I think transparency is the ultimate way to get rid of the distance in atoms. But I think for now, let's try to avoid do complex things. Try not to, like before, you can come to Shenzhen, stay here for 1 year, try to be orchestra everything. You can go to inspecting all the factories. You can talk face to face, handling them or measure that or instruct them right on the manufacturing floor, but you cannot do them now. So you better to rethink your process of collaborating with the ecosystem. I would propose, like I just did, was to re-engineering from existing hardware, and you focusing on services, on brandings, marketings.
And from my experience also, I directly go via Alibaba.com, for example, to get in contact with factories, even from here, and that usually works very well as well. So someone else asks about the hardware ecosystem outside of Shenzhen, so the rising hubs like Dongguan, Fushan, Huizhou.
Yeah.
What do they have as competitive advantage, maybe, to launch a hardware startup or to work with their ecosystem compared to Shenzhen, maybe?
So Shenzhen is becoming too expensive. And Shenzhen is becoming the interface or the living room. So you come here, that's your interface of most of the suppliers. But if you want to go to some verticals, for example, the aluminum suppliers, because of all the environmental protection needs, Shenzhen does not have that kind of industry. You have to go to Foshan. And there are some, if you specialized in lightings, like LED lightings, there are a lot of them in Jiangmen. So you go to Jiangmen, you find a supplier there. So I think they are quite complementary. You start your base camp in Shenzhen or in Hong Kong, and you outreach to the whole Delta area or even the whole China. So for example, if you want to make a vacuum cleaner, the best way is not to build from scratch in Shenzhen. You can stay in Shenzhen, you find the needs, who is doing vacuum cleaner, go to them, and the OEM put on your brand and you sell them to your countries. That's it. Because they have been doing vacuum cleaner for decades, that you don't want to compete with them.
And maybe one last question, because we have to wrap up after that.
Okay.
What kind of common issues or demands from foreign companies caused failures in launching their hardware company in the past?
There are too many of them, but I think one of the noteworthy one is about culture. So it's a very different culture that both for the suppliers or the startups. Everybody should be more open-minded. People should be respecting their way of doing business because they have been successful survival by doing their way. So you have to change yourself to match their API. So I think it's the mutual respect is the key point.
Yeah, I can totally share this from my experience as well. Like
Okay.
when also like speaking a little bit of Chinese always helps because it makes you more approachable as a foreigner, and yeah, just speaking on the same level really goes a long way. And I think that's also the way to go to do business, even especially as a small player, as a startup, etc. So unfortunately, we couldn't answer all the questions, but we have to wrap up here. I believe, well, Eric, you're also, you can be joined on LinkedIn and other social networks if you want to have more direct questions or discussions. Thanks again for everyone to be here, for listening. And I'll hand back the mic to Simon from SwissNext.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Raphael. Very appreciate your contribution and the excellent input during our webinar. Yeah, by the way, Eric, I really like your background. It looks like very cool, makerspace, very workshop style. And the same with our audience, Charles, who just commented in the chat box. Yeah, and last, I would like to let our Swiss staffs know, InnoSwiss China Camp now also has new locations in the south of China. Which are Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong. We can help you to explore your potential market in this area as well. So join InnoSwiss China Camp and your benefits can include IP consultancy, expert call, and the China market report and the one-on-one meetings with the partners, potential clients, and also stakeholders. So please feel free to send me emails if you have questions regarding to InnoSwiss China Camp. And due to the coronavirus, the international travel is difficult, but we're still here for you and support you remotely. Yeah, due to the time limitation, now we are coming to the end of today's webinar. For our audience, if you have more questions, you can send email to innovation@swissnextchina.org and follow our social medias as below. And besides, very lucky, all of you will receive the slides today and with the thank you email afterwards. And thank you, Eric, for your generosity. And our next webinar will be about SheTech, enabling women's empowerment in tech world. This webinar will be held on May 27th, and we will have 3 female entrepreneurs talent. And looking forward to meeting you on the air again. Okay, dear all, thank you for your great engagement. And once again, Raphael and Eric, many thanks for your contribution. Let's say goodbye together.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Looking for a host you remotely or whenever you can travel to Shenzhen.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.